What's good, everybody? It's your boy Warren Shaw, and we're here for another session of dope interviews. Today, we are joined by writer and film director Michèle Stephenson. Michèle, how are you doing?
I'm fine, thanks. Thank you for having me on your program.
Oh, we are honored and privileged to have you here. On the Dope Interviews show, we've been doing a lot of stuff in the sports field. We're doing a lot of stuff in the entertainment and music industry as well too. And to hear and kind of talk to you, this is probably our most serious entry, in the
Oh,
conversation that we're having, because we're talking about a pretty deep and integrated topic. So your documentary, Stateless, it hits in a lot of ways, and it kind of journeys, I'd say, over maybe three or four main characters from what I remember, in the documentary, that are kind of intertwined, and some are even on opposite sides. Tell
mhm.
our fans and listeners, if you will, just what Stateless means to you, what the film is kind of about, and what brought you to the project.
Sure. Well, Stateless is a film that looks at the lived experiences of Dominicans of Haitian descent who lost their citizenship back in 2013. Imagine like you're born in the United States, and from one day to the next, the Supreme Court decides that the birth certificate you've owned all your life is no longer valid, and you have no birthplace. You have no place to call your home, your country. But on top of that, you can't get access to any ID papers that allow you to have a job, allow you to go to school, allow you to rent to buy a phone or buy telephone service, mobile phone service. And that's where Dominicans of Haitian descent found themselves back in 2013. And on top of it, the ruling was made retroactive to 1929. So their parents and the parents of their parents who had been in the country were also in the same situation. And myself, being from the island, I'm of Haitian descent. I was born in Haiti. My dad is Haitian. My mom is Panamanian. And growing up with Dominicans, with the culture as part of our culture, but also understanding some of the tensions that exist, I was compelled to sort of explore that story as a filmmaker who's done a lot of work of documentary film, really looking at personal experiences. But at the heart of the work that I do, and I do also with my partner at our company, Rada Studio, is look at how systemic oppression, racism affects us on a personal level. And because I have roots in Caribbean and Latin America, the colorism, pigmentocracy, how that manifests itself is very much has affected my personal life, my parents, my families, as well as understanding that institutionally, we've suffered as well with state violence. And so I had a deep connection and felt the need to go and explore the stories and also look at relationships through the personal level of Dominicans and Haitians. And so Rosa Iris, who is the main character in the film, the main participant, is a Dominican lawyer who is of Haitian descent. And this is her cause. Her cause is to fight for the rights of Dominicans of Haitian descent, understanding the depth of internalized oppression that exists, folks that we may think are Black who don't consider themselves Black and are discriminating against other Black people. So it was very important for me to follow her, be inspired by her drive, and understand that she's one of many other Black women in the DR working in this sphere. And then there's also the other side of it, which are the ultra nationalist right wing folks that we could compare to, the GOP here or Trump supporters here. It's the same rhetoric, it's the same hatred against Blackness, the anti-Blackness that we see. But the twist is, it's what we might consider, or people we might consider other Black folks, right? And that's how internalized oppression sort of plays out and white supremacy plays out. Sometimes you don't need laws to be enforced, with the whip. You just have people who push for it. And in this case, that's what statelessness is. It's state-sanctioned anti-Blackness. It's kind of the ultimate expression. You don't have to kill people anymore. You just need to render them invisible where they have no access to anything. And, Haiti represents a lot for us, being the first successful slave revolt in the Americas, a Black republic, unashamedly, and has paid the price. And it's a constant reminder to the other side of the island of their own Blackness and needing to deal with that.
Listen, when I watched it, it evoked a lot of emotional responses from me. We were talking briefly off air, if you will, too, about even about my background being Jamaican and kind of growing up around people of Haitian descent in my neighborhood and seeing how they were treated here. But to be treated like that, you know what I mean, on your island and country, like that is just it's bananas, you know what I mean? And it's not even that, that far, like that long ago. Like when you're kind of when you're outlining what happened here, what kind of brought you to Rosa Iris, and what was she cool? Yeah, what I mean, and saying, listen, go ahead and film me as I'm going through
Yeah.
this. I mean, she was running for office and all kind of stuff was going on in the time that you got to spend some time there with that. And it was just, there's a lot to this story.
For sure. Rosa is like a documentary filmmaker's dream come true in terms of being the storyteller. I met her through some work I had actually done around the earthquake. I had done a series of digital shorts looking at how there was a collaboration happening on the island after the earthquake between Haitians and also between young Dominicans and young Haitians that had nothing to do with foreign intervention, but that we were kind of our own sort of saviors in the process. And through that network, when this decision happened, I learned more about the work that Dominicans of Haitian descent were doing to protect their rights and fight for their rights. One organization in particular, Reconocido, which is based in Santo Domingo, totally run by Dominicans of Haitian descent, connected me to Rosa Iris. And she was working in the sugarcane fields at the time, doing legal work, trying to get people to get their papers by whatever means, meaning there were always some loopholes or ways of at least getting some documentation so you could at least get a job, right? Or you could at least register for school, even though it wasn't total citizenship as you had a right to. And so I met her, and I remember the first day I met her in this small legal office, and then we went off to the sugarcane community. And I guess I fell in love with her spirit. I mean, she was totally open, vulnerable, committed, and actually was collaborating with us and helping us find stories to best exemplify the obstacles that the community faced. So we didn't know she was going to run for office. She kind of decided, and while we were shooting, we're like, oh, we need to follow this as well. And she was completely open to us having access to the process for her and what it meant for her. I won't say which way that she wins or loses. I want people to watch it and tune in on July 19th on the broadcast on PBS.
Bless for sure. Listen, without giving too much of it away, I guess in some ways too, in the campaign trail though, right? Mm-hmm. You just see for her just the layers of corruption, right? That exist, in places like that, if you will. It's like, all right, well, give me 100 pesos and you know what I mean? Like it's crazy because we live in the States, right? And we know that there's been voter suppression and there's been various ways to try to manipulate certain aspects of things like that too. But to see it so candidly, you know what I mean? Like in your face, like you guys were able to capture that like on film. And, again, without giving too much away, her just emotional responses, to that, they were just so poignant, I think, even for me to I was like, man, because she was like, look where my country is at. Like, look at the state of affairs that we're really in. What was it like as a filmmaker to kind of see that and know that was going on and how that was in fact affecting the person that you were kind of chronicling throughout?
Wow, that's a great question. I mean, we were emotionally invested in her success as well, really rooting for her in the process. Sometimes felt she was kind of naive about what was going on, but there was a bigger purpose, I think, to her running the campaign, right? I kind of compare her to sort of AOC. She's our Dominican AOC in terms of really challenging the status quo. And I think that winning or losing winning, of course, would have been great. But the bigger point is that this Dominican woman of Haitian descent from a very a humble background was able to lay a stake on the ground, right? Was able to occupy space and inspire people in spite of the loss, that there is sort of like an incremental sort of pushing that hopefully allows for others to do work, if not as candidates, maybe around the voting process or pushing around other elements where there needs to be work that needs to be done. For example, I think Angela Davis says freedom is in the struggle. It's not necessarily the goal. You go for the goal, but what's important is the journey, right? And what you learn from the journey and what you leave behind in the journey, knowing that, this is 400 or 500 years of oppression that we're working on, that we're working with, and we're chipping away at it with every step. And and that's what she exemplifies, Rosa Iris. And yeah, I mean, the corruption was real, and yet she never lost her core integrity, which I think says a lot in terms of being an example for others.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great word. She screams and evokes integrity, throughout the process. And it's very easy to kind of watch it and forget it's real life. It's not made for film or fiction. I mean? This real life and real emotions that she was experiencing and going through, and she's on her journey to really just kind of do the right thing for people.
Mm-hmm.
And your intro and conversation about it just, again, is like to almost just be made invisible by law. It doesn't even, I can't even comprehend that in so many ways.
Yeah.
There was one of the folks that she was working with, the gentleman with the children, and I want to say it's Teofilo. How do you say
Teofilo? Yeah, Teofilo.
And his story and how he was treated, I think, in the office when he was trying to explain, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly as well too, you correct me if I'm wrong, like the birth certificate of his mother, and he was like, and the guy was like, well, I don't care. It says this, and he wouldn't even let Teofilo get a word in edgewise about what it was, and it was like, listen, I'm gonna go back to my phone, kicking up my feet. I was really treated like a less than citizen. That too was heart wrenching. Just again, I know what you try to do was capture the real, and you did, but I'm trying to figure out, and sorry, I'm jumping around a little bit, but if I'm the guy in the office and I'm being filmed, why would I be such an asshole?
Well, firstly, those were undercover cameras.
Got you.
Those were undercover cameras. And that's the thing, is that we would not have been able to capture this if the cameras were present, or we might have been able to, but not to the extent of what we. And so Rosa and Teofilo again demonstrated another point of bravery to agree to wholeheartedly and enthusiastically to wear undercover cameras. He had a camera on his chest that was specially made undercover with the camera was a button, so all this gear that I got from this special place to put on him to document that. And so this is how people act, you're supposed to be serving the public, but you're not, you are through the bureaucracy, like you're wielding whatever power you think you may have over somebody else who's lesser than you, as opposed to providing a service that are, the people's tax dollars are paying for, including Teofilo. To this day, he's contributed to a pension when he was working as a citizen and still does not have access to it when now they've taken the citizenship away. And so, yeah, that's emblematic, the attitude that of the bureaucratic. We sometimes get that in New York, but not as harsh. The bureaucracies that, make you wait and all of that. But it's to the nth degree in a place like DR. And when you think about where you have so little power to begin with, holding a seat in a place like your bureaucracy or a government building where you're maybe not paid as much as you should be, whoever's going to come to you, you're going to squeeze that person, you're going to wield your power on them. And somebody like Teofilo has very little recourse. I mean, we've supported his process to get his papers, and every time they give us a requirement, He meets it, and then they give another obstacle, and it goes on and on again. It's like a never-ending cycle. So yes, they were on. He was on an undercover camera, as well as the checkpoints that we see in the car where the military stops them. That's all undercover cameras as well as the opening scene where Rosa is arguing with the other bureaucrat, the woman, is also partially undercover. Yeah.
Man. We're talking with Michèle Stephenson, writer and film director of Stateless, this great documentary that you all have got to see. Michèle, so you did a great job also, as you kind of also said in the outset, of trying to make sure that you told the other side. Mm-hmm. How willing was that other side to be heard and seen? And did they understand the gravity of what you were trying to do, in this documentary?
Well, interestingly enough, we had the burden of choice in terms of the right-wing ultranationalists who wanted to tell their story, which is interesting. And I don't think she never found out that I was Haitian, right? That I was of Haitian descent, that I was born in Haiti. She never asked. I think because of, and it's a place where, I was manipulating my own light skin position to sort of participate and be part of this circle. Questions were never asked of me. One thing that I realized with Gladys, and it's very important that we note that, she was somebody that we ended up sort of casting, for lack of a better word, because she's a woman. As far as I'm concerned, she is a Black woman. Who spews these hatred in a way that's almost sort of unassuming, right? She could be my aunt or my neighbor. There's something unassuming about her, but when you hear her speak, it's disarming, right? And so I felt that in that sense, she was sort of a perfect sort of person to follow, to tell this story of the other side. We had had interviewed other people, mostly men, who were so angry and aggressive that I felt, for me, and I would assume that even also for audiences, it would be difficult to spend time with them, that they would become caricatures really of that movement. So for her, having her was a lot more significant, I think, in terms of the impact for us, in terms of the obstacle that she represents, that people like Rosa Iris in the community have to face. But the interesting thing about her movement, is I had very few questions to ask. I would ask one question and she would go on with her perspective. All she wanted to do was get her story out. She knew that I was, talking to other people who didn't agree, but she was so invested and believed in her worldview that she wanted that documented. So she took me around. She, as you'll see in the film, she took me to certain places, to the border, other places she wanted to show me, but what she saw is not what we saw. And so I realized that, this ultra-nationalist right-wing movement is like a belief system. It's a worldview, it's a religion, it's a fanaticism. You can't convince them, and they're not interested in being convinced. There's a self-fulfilling sort of circular logic that you can't really penetrate. So if we're going to make change, we have to build other narratives and work towards building community with people who are on the fence, or who don't know, or who need to know more information to be more involved.
Yeah, she says something, and again, I can't quote her to even paraphrase it correctly, but it's almost like, she's like, "Oh, how can I be racist? I have a Black friend," or something. You know what I mean? It was something like that. I was like, "What?" You know what I mean? It was just so. What are we talking about right here? So she's a very interesting character, and again, I can appreciate the fact that you were intentional about making sure that that other side is told, to kind of see just kind of how, in some ways, I mean, we'll keep it honest, like how ridiculous some of the thought processes are, and kind of what maybe both sides are even kind of fighting against.
Yeah, and the level of the hatred that Rosa Iris and the community are up against, you're not going to convince these folks. They're very passionate. It's about building these other, the movement for others to get them more mobilized, to understand the risks that are there. I mean, Rosa Iris's life was at risk.
No, really, real talk.
And she got asylum here in the United States, so she's living in Pittsburgh now.
No, wow. No, real
So
talk.
yeah.
I mean, that stuff it was, she's there with her family, her son, and stuff like that. Like it's crazy when you see what's going on and how strong that hatred really, truly, truly, truly is. And kudos to you, though. I think for understanding sometimes you have to play a role to tell the story. You know what I mean? And it's like sometimes it's best to just be quiet. You know what I mean? Just be the fly on the wall. So and let people kind of just go off, because like you're saying, she didn't even ask you anything. Like that's crazy to me. I'm not going on any camera, not asking questions about who you are and what's going on. Like who does that?
Yeah. Well, she asked the bare minimum, but when it was about telling her story, she didn't want to know even my opinion. Wow. She wasn't interested in my opinion. And so, I played along with it, as you're saying, but it was emotionally very draining after the fact. Every time I would spend time with her, there's so many what you hear is only half of what was discussed. I mean, when I was at dinner, talking with her and her friends, listening to them, and it was just devastating to hear the level of hate of other human beings, and the way they would talk about Haitian people and their descendants. And anyway, I had to process, I had to detox in my hotel room, after my time, shooting or filming with her. And the other thing that's so circular about it is, it doesn't matter what you're talking about, it's because of the Haitians. It's like, it doesn't matter, but somehow the discussion is going to end up with, they're the reason why this is, we have this problem. So yeah, it's deep.
It truly is. That's absolutely brutal. Listen, I think, before I let you get out of here, that the documentary is receiving critical acclaim. You know what I mean? And what we like to do here in Dope Interviews is allow people to kind of brag on themselves. You know what I mean? A little bit. So, I mean, what of the awards and the nominations and things that are kind of come your way? I know they're all special and they all mean something, because when you put your blood and your soul into something like this too, but what was one maybe that was surprising, or that kind of hit you the most, hit you and your team the most, about like, man, they really see what we're trying to do here?
Wow, what a question. I think there are two moments for me that are emotionally really kind of powerful. One was the award. I don't know if you know the Black Star Film Festival, but it's a BIPOC-led film festival by, for, and about folks of color, Black and brown filmmakers, but film and audiences as well. And for me, that meant a lot, that I was in community and community was recognizing the work, and that it was helping sort of transform our sense of healing, but building community. It's Black Star Film Festival. Everybody check it out. It's once a year. It's coming up in August, and it's in Philadelphia. It's also virtual. It's been virtual these last 2 years. They have a hybrid festival this coming August. So for me, that really warmed my heart. And I think the second thing was actually the screening in Miami. Sure. That I was talking to you about. Again, it was about being in community, and this is just the beginning, but we had our screening through the Third Horizon Film Festival. It was our second in-person screening, and the conversations that the film engendered within, the Latinx and Caribbean community about colorism, pigmentography, looking at, the light skin privilege versus how dark skinned Dominicans and Haitians are treated. There was a lot of a lot of fiery conversation, and I think also in light of what's been going on within the Heights and the criticism around the Heights, Stateless comes as a counterpoint to that, to better understand, our Caribbean communities and what that means, and the things that we have to address, but in a way, through film and storytelling, it hits us emotionally on so many levels. I think it allows us to be vulnerable in our conversations too. Especially when you see somebody like Rosa Iris being vulnerable on the screen, it allows us to sort of step up to it. So we have these vulnerable conversations, and I hope to have many more like the one in Miami, where we can unpack some of these questions that are deeply seated within ourselves.
Listen, I think like it's so timely, right? So it's one thing because where we are in kind of the US, where we are right now as a society, so to speak, and then you get just kind of snatched back and it's like it's not just here, that really, like you said, it's really powerful, and it invokes definitely a definitive response, kind of one way or the other. I mean, there are people on both sides of it one way, and I'm kind of sorry I missed this screening here in South Florida. It's funny you said I just left New York, ironically. So
Yeah.
so I'm back here now for the kids.
Yeah, and the strong thing also about that screening is people started to talk about Miami and the racism in Miami, the racism in South Florida, between, white Cubans and Haitians and
It's a thing.
Black Americans and all of that. It's very heated. And when do we have an opportunity to unpack that from a different perspective that's, slightly different, from New York City or from Chicago, not that those dynamics are not, but there is a Caribbean dynamic to South Florida around how race plays out. And there was a lot of unpacking of that, and of regulations too that were happening in Miami that were, Jim Crow, like they call him Juan Crow. I think they were.
Oh, wow.
There was a mention of Juan Crow.
I heard that one. Not the one crow.
Juan Crow, yeah. I mean, that's real. It's real. Yeah.
Oh my God. Michèle, tell people where, what's next. You know what I mean? You're coming off, you're riding this wave right now, but you know how it is. It's like, what have you done for me lately? That's our society. So you released this and this was dope, but what's next? What do you have your eyes set on for your next project?
Well, there are a number of things that are pots on the fire. So we just come out of the Tribeca Film Festival and won an award for a virtual reality project called The Changing Same. And we won Best Immersive Narrative. And I call it a magical realist time travel through racial justice in America. So you play with time and looking at connections between the reality of race today versus what was going on, under slavery. And we have 2 more episodes that we'll be producing for that. It's a trilogy, and we just won the prize, the grand jury prize at Tribeca for that immersive piece. We have a documentary that is finishing up, a biopic on Nikki Giovanni, the poet. I don't know if you know her, and she's from the Black Arts Movement in the late 60s, looking at her poetry. And and the Stateless is coming out. So we'll be broadcast on July 19th on PBS. And there's other projects in the making, but those are the ones that are rolling out this year.
Well, you are vibing. You are, hot as fire and lava right now. And I salute you, for your success and going here and telling the hard stories that some people are still afraid to tell it and to touch, and having these deep level conversations that consistently need to be had on a more regular basis. Tell the people where they can find you on social media, and any plugs that you need to give out here to our folks here on Dope Interviews.
Sure. I'm on Instagram at Michèle_0608. And our studio is Rada Studio NYC on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook. So please come on and sign on to our newsletter. You can get on our newsletter through our website, which is radastudio.org, O-R-G, Rada, R-A-D-A, studio.org. We have a monthly newsletter that we print, that we launch out for folks.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna go ahead and sign up right now. And I want to thank you for joining us here, Michèle Stephenson. For all of your fans and listeners, you have now been in tune for another dope interview. Thank you so much for joining us. Michèle, continued success to you, and we'll catch up with you next time. Don't be a stranger. We got to catch up with all your dope projects.
I won't. Thank you so much, Warren. Take care.